Slaying Monster Hunter World's final Elder Dragon is futile. How can you fight fate? Alice. Welcome to How Hard Could It Be, where I fail over and over and over again, and then make a video about it. Also, something about challenges, I guess, if you're here for that. I've enjoyed Monster Hunter for the last couple of years. I've fought most of the monsters and tackled more than a couple of walls. But Fatalis... hoo boy. Fatalis is tough. Fatalis has been a tough nut to crack. I've met my fair share of monsters that have been temporarily unbeatable for me. Kieran was my first one, who I had to learn how to play bow in order to beat. Thank you, Rathalos Bow. Kieran is random, kinda unpredictable, and quite speedy and feisty. It doesn't help that his lightning spots in the ground kind of blend in a little bit. Arch-tempered Teostra was really hard to defeat as well, and ultimately, I cheesed him with a ridiculous Meowster build. Only did it once, but once was enough. I've even managed to pull through a win against Raging Brachydios, which mostly consisted of me slamming potions down my throat while screaming during the last portion of the fight.
Don't you dare die on me!
I've even slayed Alatreon repeatedly in preparation for Fatalis. I spent the last month or so either in preparation for the fight against Fatalis or struggling to defeat him. Fatalis is most definitely the hardest fight in the game, and with good reason. Fatalis is more than just a monster. Fatalis is covered in the blood, armor, and weapons of its slain foes. Hell, if you're not careful, you run the risk of becoming melted to its body. To struggle against Fatalis is to struggle against your own hubris and entropy itself. Fatalis is the end of empires. Fatalis is erosion. Fatalis is death. Fatalis serves as a dark reflection for humanity. It destroys seemingly because it can, not because it has to in order to survive, not because it has to in defense of itself. It sits in Castle Shrade as if by right of conquest. So, the last 2 weeks, I've been trying to beat Fatalis. I've fought Fatalis a lot. I can't count the number of times. Fatalis is the perfect monster in a lot of ways, and not the perfect, most fun fight, but a creature with seemingly perfect counters to any hunter. I've been bullied with repetitive explosions planted right beneath my feet. I've had him catch me right in the middle of his floor flame attack with inadequate time to run out of it. As a hunter, you even run the risk of having your teammates slay you on accident, locking you out of safety. And I say all of this not to complain, merely to state fact. Fatalis is a bitch of a fight. I have fought and failed so many times. At this point, I've just been committing self-flagellation through Fatalis. I said that as a bit of a dark joke on a particularly frustrating evening before I stopped for the night, but it stuck with me for longer than that moment. It sparked a moment of insight for myself. Am I committing self-harm through this fight? It certainly feels like a form of self-harm. I'm not saying this to be dramatic or garner sympathy, just to express some ideas. So let's break it all the way down. Why am I fighting Fatalis? More than that, why am I continuing to to fight Fatalis? Is it for the armor? I mean, not really. I have 4 out of 5 pieces of the armor just from my first few test fights using the Palarin. Weapons? I mean, sure, they look neat and they have a lot of raw damage, but I can use just about any weapon to fight pretty much any other monster. Is it pride? Not really. After all, I've given up on other games. Plus, I've got dozens of games in my backlog, so it's not like I have nothing else to play either. So, digital self-harm. It's a term that's been thrown around quite a bit in recent years. It revolves around creating negativity for yourself online. According to SiteCentral.com, digital self-harm is creating separate accounts and posting negative things to your own personal profile. Instead of physically harming oneself, it's a mental, a psychological harm. In essence, it's cyberbullying yourself. I think, however, we should take the term digital self-harm and separate it from, let's call it self-cyberbullying, and make that its own term, and widen digital self-harm to a wider subset of behaviors. Doom scrolling, for example, is another form of digital self-harm. You may have found yourself doom scrolling during the last several months. I know I have. Doom scrolling is when you scroll through things like Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, looking mostly at the negative things going on in the world. Sarah Zed created an interesting video about doomers that brought the idea of this to light for me. So now that I have those two out of the way, let's talk about reinforcing negative thoughts or self-talk. One of the key aspects of digital self-harm in both of these examples is negative self-talk or negative thoughts. In one, it's verbalized. In the other, it's negative thoughts that are about things outside of yourself and your control. What about partaking in events that reinforce your negative self-talk through known negative outcomes? Let's throw a term on the board. Gamer self-harm. Gamer self-harm occurs when your actions in a video game begin to reinforce your own negative self-talk. My recent experience was with Fatalis. I tried it solo. I tried it with teams. I tried it with the bow. I tried it with the dual blades. I even entertained using the greatsword. I changed my build design probably a dozen times. Different skill balances, different mantles and pieces of armor, different combinations. Nothing worked. I fought Fatalis over and over and over again, and every time I failed. And as a result, my thoughts slowly turned negatively inwards.
Of course you can't beat it. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. There's nothing you can do that will make you worthwhile in the real world. Why should it be any different in this video game? Everything you do is bound to end up in failure. Your friends leave you, your significant others leave you for other people. You can't maintain any of your relationships. You're a terrible brother, son, even grandson. You don't deserve your job, promotion, or even your paycheck. You're just a worthless waste of oxygen trying to justify its own stupid existence through a video game, and you can't even do that.
Of course, this doesn't happen in a bubble. I already have problems with my negative self-talk. I've had a lot of failures in my life. Ones that were partially in my control and ones that were completely outside of it. Part of the reason I probably play video games as much as I do is having that control, that agency that I haven't often had in real life. Just because it doesn't happen in a bubble, however, doesn't mean it isn't a problem. No acts of self-harm occur in a bubble, but it's important to recognize it, talk about it, and find ways out of the cycle. It's more than just taking a break when you're frustrated. Otherwise, you risk coming back into the frustration with the same exact mindset. Even success isn't necessarily a cure, because it's easy to reframe that success as not being your own.
Why are you celebrating? You didn't succeed. All you did was piggyback off of the work of others. This wasn't your success, it was their success. You were just along for the ride. You got lucky with a good team. Next time it will just be another brutal failure because you didn't earn or deserve that success.
So how can one stop the cycle of self-abuse through video game failure? An important step is to confront the thoughts that are being fed into. Sometimes you have to recognize that some of them are true. Yeah, I failed. I failed the mission myself and maybe even my teammates. That's okay though, it really is just a game. You also have to recognize that your failures are not all-encompassing, and it's likely that very few of them have anything to do with each other. They're not intrinsic to your character. This failure doesn't justify my other failures, and my other failures shouldn't feed into this one. They are separate events that don't have anything to do with each other. It's also important to remember that failure doesn't justify the actions or abuses from others. This video game failure isn't why people have left you. It's not why relationships can't be maintained. It doesn't justify or excuse what other people have done to you. Yeah, people have left me. Yes, I've been left behind by others, and I can't control those things. Being unable to beat Fatalis has nothing to do with that. It doesn't excuse the abuse done to me in the past, and it won't excuse any abuse done to me in the future. The most important thing to do, in my opinion, is to always try to reframe the failure. It doesn't have to be completely positive. After all, failure is frustrating, and it can be hard to be optimistic after a crushing defeat, no matter what game it is. If this mission, quest, or grind is something that you feel you need to continue to do, then you need to make sure that you are continuing for the correct reasons, and make sure those failures aren't feeding into negative self-talk. I mean, when you think about it, I'm not failing. I'm learning the mechanics. I'm learning the math. I'm learning how to dodge. I'm learning the attack patterns. Every failure means I'm gaining something in return, be it knowledge, experience, materials, or finding out what isn't working. During difficult times, it's important to remember Maxim 70 from the 70 Maxims of Maximally Effective Mercenary. Failure is mandatory. Letting failure be the last thing you do is optional. You know what though? It's okay to let failure be the last thing you do. Maybe you can't defeat that final boss. Maybe you can't get through that wall. Maybe you just can't grind up that piece of gear. That's okay. You are not your failures. They are a part of you and your experiences, but they don't have to be your identity, and they shouldn't be your identity. For what it's worth, I beat Fatalis 4 times. I decided to relearn the Charge Blade, did a solo test hunt against Fatalis to figure some things out, then hunted some other monsters. The first team fight against Fatalis, I pulled out a win. It was all I could do not to scream at the top of my lungs. I then managed to beat Fatalis again using a different Charge Blade, Fatalis' Charge Blade. And then I have had a lot more failures, but I changed some things around and beat him with a greatsword twice, just a couple nights ago. I haven't quite beaten it any more times, but I've pulled out 4 wins against quite possibly the most perfect creature in the Monster Hunter franchise. Video games almost always offer immediate reattempts after a failure. This makes it incredibly easy to get caught in a downward mental spiral as each failure feeds into the next and into one's own negative self-talk. Real-life failures often come with a hefty buffer period. It can be days before another job interview comes up, weeks before you find someone else to ask out on a date, months or even years before you can attempt getting a promotion again. Video games, though, minutes, moments. With the new consoles, it could be down to seconds before you're getting pummeled again by your latest failure. These shrinking buffer times can do more to fuel negative self-talk than the outside world just because the cycle is faster. The previous failure is still looming over you in your mind as you start again. Do you mind? Can you listen to And then outside of the game, every attempt from someone outside telling you to take a break or telling you it's just a game can feel patronizing and insulting. I've recognized that in the moment it's not just a game. In the moment it's connected to who I am and what I'm capable of. If I can just get past this hurdle, then maybe all the things I tell myself aren't actually true. I am capable. I am worthy. However, the failures just wind up reinforcing that negativity. Now, before I get into the challenges, here's what I want you to take away from this video. Number 1, take breaks if you're getting frustrated and engaging in negative self-talk due to a video game or, really anything. Number 2, reframe the failure. It's a learning experience. It's a slow gain of materials. It's learning the mechanics. Learning where you fall short. It's learning that your build isn't quite there yet. There's so many things you can learn from failure. Like Yoda says. Number 3, disconnect the game from your self-worth. It can be difficult to do it, but it can really help. You are not your failures in the game. You are a complex person with multiple failures, but also multiple successes. Number 4, wind down between failed attempts. You don't have to jump right back into your next attempt after the game over screen. Take some time to grind up more equipment, readjust your build, maybe listen to a video about how to fight what you're facing. This can help with the compounding nature of multiple failures and maybe make the mental load more manageable. Number 5, if all else fails, quit. Find something else to play. Maybe you come back to it. I quit Monster Hunter for months when I first hit my wall with Kieran. I only beat Kieran after starting another playthrough on PC so that my girlfriend and I could play with one another. I came back, I learned a new weapon, and I beat that smug-ass unicorn. Even still, you don't have to come back to it. You can just move on. That's okay. Part of life is recognizing outer limits and sometimes moving on. And I think that's just about all I have to say. So, let's get into the challenge. I started writing this video because I recognized that the self-flagellation through Fatalis comment I made on Discord was maybe a bad thing to think. I recognized that I was doing something unhealthy and I wanted to examine why that was and how I could help myself move past it. I also needed to make sure I was using the words I wanted to use correctly. I almost used the term negative reinforcement, which means something else in regards to behavioral science, the Skinner guy. I'm no psychologist, but I do genuinely think that the term digital self-harm needs to be widened to a greater array of negative behaviors enacted on the internet and even video games and other forms of technology. Self-cyberbullying is only one part of the equation, at least in my opinion. Doom scrolling and this video game self-harm that I discussed here are also parts of it. Also, in the writing of this, I initially had my self-criticisms being directed at myself by myself. I used first-person terms. And while that's an accurate portrayal of my self-talk, especially the negative self-talk, I decided to go with a second-person singular framing of those segments so I could do a sort of talking to myself kind of thing with two different versions of me. One in the Venom hoodie and one in just the t-shirt for the positive stuff. Getting the aforementioned talking to myself segments to work was a bit of a challenge. One thing that I didn't quite understand in Vegas is the masking tools. See, there's a crop and pan area on this menu, but also a masking tool. That lets me cut out certain areas in the scene. This enabled me to blend the two cuts together in order to combine them properly. Of course, there was still a hard line displayed in there, but it gave me the effect I wanted. For now, this is all I've got, and I think it works pretty well. Not perfect, but it looks about the way I wanted it to. On your way out, set us up the bomb, chug some potions, target the head, make Fatalis non-canon, and remember that you're only as good as your mind. So keep it healthy.